What's up, chess player, and welcome to the ultimate guide to chess calculation. I'm gonna go from the very simple puzzles up to incredibly difficult ones using chess.com Puzzle Storm to explain you the entire decision-making process, how you should find the best move, how you should calculate the variations, so you can bring your tactics into a completely new level. So let's get started. Three, two, one, let's go. So I'm gonna go ahead and solve 50 positions here. No time limit because I need time to explain you everything in a lot of details. So the first ones I would go relatively fast because it's just a checkmate in one in most of the cases, and you can do that on your own basically. So the recipe, you should always use the 4-step system formula to find the best move, no matter whether it's so simple like this one or a much more difficult one. The steps of those 4 steps formula are checks, captures, threads, and active moves. Always start with checks. So here bishop h7 is the only check possible here, and the king has nowhere to go, so it's also a checkmate. Let's go ahead. Here we have the only check, which is rook takes f4, and that doesn't work because we just lose the rook. So we go into the second step, which is captures. And that is how we go through those steps every single time: checks, captures, threads, and active moves. And in this specific order, because otherwise we might miss some incredible opportunities. So no checks, captures, we can take the rook. We have more attackers than he has defenders, so we win the rook. Here we go ahead and look for the checks, but actually, we still need to pay attention to our opponent's move. Remember, you never play alone, so you need, once your opponent is making a move, you need to think, okay, what is the purpose of this move? Well, it's a check, so we have to deal with it. We don't have time for our own checks. And the most effective way to deal with a check, because remember, no matter what happens, we always start with most active options first, and then proceed with passive ones. The most effective one is to eliminate the piece that is giving you a check. In this case, we can do that, and that is the right move. Now, do we have any checks? Yes, bishop f5 is a check. The king has nowhere to escape. The rook can block it, but we just take it, and that's a checkmate. So you see, we just follow the system so far. Rook b8 is a check. We go for it. We don't have any checkmate, any follow-up checks, but we win the rook, and that is good enough. Here, do we have any checks? Yes. We have queen d2, the only check that is a checkmate. So I guess you understand the system by now. I'm gonna just go ahead and deliver those one-move checkmates so we can really come to the positions which are more difficult to dive deep into the calculation process. So here what's going on, we are playing as black and we can just take the rook, take the queen immediately and win the game. Here we have 2 check opportunities, and here, by the way, a very important rule for you to remember: before you make your move, in every single position, before you make your move, make sure that the piece you're moving cannot be taken. Or if it can, you're okay with that. Because here you have queen d8 check, but it can be taken by the knight, and that's going to be a big blunder. Whereas queen to e8 doesn't have such a problem, it cannot be taken there. Here queen g1 would be a check, but the queen can be taken, so it doesn't work. But queen h3 cannot be taken, and that's a checkmate. Okay, here the king is pretty weak, but it can run to e7, so we need to stop that. We are looking for checks. Rook f4 doesn't work, rook g6 doesn't work because the rook can be taken, so knight g6 is a checkmate. Here, very simple, queen g7, no need to explain. Here, the only check which doesn't blunder the queen is queen to a8, and that's also checkmate in 1. Here, there are no checks at all. So we are coming to the second step of our system, which is captures. Well, the only reasonable thing we can take here is the bishop. But I wouldn't really consider it a capture. You need to really understand this difference between captures and trades. So basically here we just exchange this bishop. We are not winning anything. And that itself is not really active, especially if we want to attack, if we want to get the initiative, we don't need just to exchange the pieces without any good reason. So we go ahead in terms of our 4 steps system. The next step is to create a thread, and we also start in a specific order. First of all, the king. Can we create a thread for the king? Because that's going to be the most active thing we can do, checkmate thread, but it's not possible here. The second step is whether we can attack the queen, and the answer is yes, we can attack the queen and also forking the bishop there, so it's a beautiful move, and we win the queen. Okay, here we have two ways to deliver a check. We have this rook and this rook, but if we are careful enough, we see that this rook is pinned, so it doesn't work, but this one is still checkmate in one, so we can't really make a mistake here. Here, queen c8 would be blundering the queen, but queen c7, sorry, is protected, and now we can sacrifice our queen because we calculate one move variation, rook takes, and then we have a follow-up check, which is also a checkmate. So when it gets more complicated, you have to calculate the variations. First, one move variations, then two moves variations, and maybe more. Here, there are actually two checks here, knight h6, but the problem with this check, king goes away, we don't have any follow-up. So it's not like you see a check and you immediately go for it. No, the right strategy is to calculate the variation first. So knight h6 doesn't work. Do we have another check? Is we have queen to g4 and king h8. We have queen to g7 follow up, and if knight g6 blocking it, then we have knight h6 and we win the queen. So that works for us. All right, white to move. The king is very exposed. We need to look for a check. Queen f8 doesn't work because we check whether the piece can be taken. It can, but queen a8 is working here because the queen cannot be captured. Here we look for checks. Once again, queen f6, no problem with that. Here we don't have any checks. So can we capture something? No, we can't because bishop g6, he will just take it back. Can we create a threat? First of all, checkmate threat. Yes, we can. Bishop f6 create a checkmate threat in one. The bishop cannot be captured, and there is nothing black can do there. Here, we cannot give a check. Well, queen c1 would just lose the queen, but we can capture the bishop here and the queen. But remember that taking the queen would be just an exchange, and just exchanging the pieces is not active enough. So queen takes e2, we have to calculate the variations, what could our opponent do, and of course we start with the most active options for him. So rook takes c8, we just take it back, queen takes, bishop takes, rook takes, and thank God we have a luft here, so we are not losing. This variation works for us, so we go for it. Okay, here, no checks. We can capture the bishop, but once again, it is just an exchange, so not an active opportunity. Doesn't work. We can capture the pawn, doesn't help. Knight takes back with the tempo. So creating a threat. We can't really create a threat against the king. We can't create a threat against the queen. Also not against the rook. But what about this bishop? We notice that it doesn't really have any moves to go, so we just need to find a way to attack it. Do we have it? Yes, we have f4, and we win the bishop. Okay, here, no checks. Queen a6, queen g7, queen h8, all just blunder the queen in one move. No captures as well. The pawn is only one reachable, but we cannot take it, it's protected. So threats. Can we attack the king, create a checkmate threat? Not really. Can we attack the queen? Yes, we can. We have our knights, it can be used for that. And normally all of the active actions happens in the center of the board, so that's the first option we check, but we also notice that that's a double attack in comparison to knight b4, which is not, so it's a more active move, and we go for it. Okay, rook f5. Now we need to decide whether we take this guy and then this one, or the other way around. Queen f5, he can take back, we take the queen, and then takes back, it's just a rook endgame. But knight takes, rook takes, we can take with a knight, and then we have an extra piece, so that's the better version. Okay, here we look for checks, straightforward, the only check, bishop b2, and yeah, here we have a choice, but you remember, why it's so important to start with checks? Because if you start with captures, you're like, oh my god, I can just take the knight, how perfect is that? Then you might miss this incredible opportunity of checkmate in one, so you have always to start with check. Okay, here queen a8 is an obvious check, and I'm gonna go ahead and do it, because afterwards I have a follow-up check, and of course you need to calculate that, and the bishop just helps, the king has to go away, and we give a checkmate. Here, do we have any checks? The only check is queen h4. We have to calculate g3, because then both the knight and the queen are under attack, but we have knight g3 because the pawn is pinned and we are winning the exchange. Okay, here we have two checks. We have rook takes h6 and queen takes h6, and it's not that simple to figure out which one is stronger. So let's go with the queen. The queen is the most active piece. King g8, do we have any follow-up? Well, queen g5 is only check I see. King goes to f8, and no follow-up afterwards, no checks available for us. Rook takes, king g7 or king g8, queen g5 once again the only follow-up, king goes away, but now the difference is the rook can be taken by our rook and we win the game. So that works, rook takes h6 is the right move. Okay, here we have the only check, queen f7, king goes to h8. How do we continue? Well, black doesn't really create any threats to our king yet, so we have one move to create a threat for him. What I see is king h8. We don't really have any checks, we don't have any captures, but we can use our knight to create a checkmate threat in one, knight e8. And now if he takes and we take it back, bishop f8 is the only move, and then it's a checkmate. So I go for it. All right. Here we don't really have any checks, and we don't really have any captures because queen takes e5 runs into rook takes e5, so it's already more complicated stuff here, and our bishop is also hanging. But I don't think we have time to go somewhere because bishop h5 just runs into g6, creating some space for our king. I mean for our opponent's king. This king is still very weak and we have to use it. What I am noticing is, remember, checks, captures, and threats, that we can create a threat against the queen and we can develop another piece. Development is always the key. I always tell you that in my videos and I can't stress it enough. Development is always the key to success. So rook on h1 is not doing anything, but we can bring it and we can control the entire file here. And of course we have to calculate the variations. What's going to happen if our bishop is going to be taken? Well, checks, rook f8 doesn't help because the rook is controlling it, so maybe we can deflect the rook first. Queen takes e5 is a way to do that with a queen sacrifice. Now, if rook takes, we have checkmate in one, and if queen takes e3 check, we just take it back. And once again, you cannot take it because of the checkmate. So it seems to work. The only question is there some difference in terms of which rook we put on f1? Logically, I want to move this rook because this one is in the center. It might be useful for some reason. For example, this knight d3 check wouldn't be possible because of this rook. So I'm gonna go for it. Queen takes e5, and that's a checkmate. Okay, so it's puzzle number 30. Remember, we want to get to 50 because that is an incredibly insane level of difficulty, and hopefully that's gonna be useful for you. So we unfortunately cannot use our bishop because it's pinned, so we only have the queen and the rook in terms of our active pieces, and we look for checks. Queen d2 is a check, the queen is protected, king has to go away, and then we have a follow-up check, queen to d1, and that's gonna be a checkmate. So we go for it. Okay, here we have a few checks, queen takes and bishop takes. Queen takes, queen d2, and I don't really see a good follow-up. We don't need to exchange the queens if we are attacking. Bishop takes, on the other hand, queen to d2, and then we can take it, or the rook is going to be unprotected and we can take that one as well. So we go for it. Okay, what do we do here? We don't really have any checks, or maybe we do. There is knight takes f6 sacrifice. Yes, it's going to be taken, but after pawn takes, we have rook takes f6, rook takes, we once again take it, and then this king might be in trouble. Because if you go away with the queen, then queen takes h5 is gonna lead to a checkmate probably, but you have queen e8, so I'm not that sure about it. h5 is covered, but we have queen g5, so you go on and on with this variation as far as you can. It feels like knight f6 is the only possible way to go no matter what, because the knight is hanging, well, at least with the bishop. If you go away, that doesn't bring you anything. Rook f5, yeah, it's not good enough because the king will be able to escape. So knight f6 seems like the right option. And now, yeah, if rook takes, queen goes away, queen g5 threatening rook h6, and you cannot deal with it. But queen to g7 now, the pawn on h5 is hanging, so we can just take it, and now rook g6 wins the queen. Okay, here we can take the rook. That is the most active move for us because, well, given a check doesn't help, the king will just take it. So we take, he take, And by the way, if we don't take the rooks and we are just 2 pawns down, that's not a good variation for us. So takes. Now if we push our pawn immediately, then we might lose because the king is in the square to catch it. But if we have the opposition is the most important endgame principle you have to remember. We win because king to g4 is gonna stop white's king from going forward. King to e3, we play king to g3, and once again stopping it king e2, king g2, and this opposition helps us to promote, so we go for it. Okay, now we need to stop going with the king and actually promote our pawn. Okay, here there are a few ways to go on with checks. Queen f4, the problem is the king can escape back, and I don't like that, as we don't win in this case and we are 2 pawns down, so maybe there is something else. There is queen to e1 check, king h3 runs into queen h4 checkmate, king g4, queen h4 is only follow-up I see, king to f5 is the only move, and then queen f4 is a checkmate. So relatively straightforward variation, we give a checkmate. Okay, here no checks possible. We can capture this knight because it's attacking also our queen. We don't want to passively deal with it, we want to actively deal with it, so eliminate the attacker. We can take it with the knight and with the rook. Well, taking with the rook runs into losing the rook, so we might not want to do that, but taking with the knight is also a possibility, and then our queen is hanging, but actually it's protected, and we attack our opponent's queen. So that variation works perfectly for us. We win the knight. Okay, here we notice that if the knight is not going to be there, we are going to give a fork. So no checks. What about captures? We want to get rid of this knight, we can exchange it, so that is a perfect way to do that, and then we have this fork. Okay, here the knight can be captured, the bishop can be captured, there are no checks. So if we take the bishop, then this knight can take it back, and we don't have any good follow-up. We can take this knight, both with the queen and the knight. If we take with the queen, then unfortunately queen g4 is possible, then the queen is hanging. We take with the knight, queen takes, we take it back, rook takes, and then we take the knight as a bishop with our knight, and we win the game. So that seems to work. Okay, here it's a rook endgame, so if we don't exchange the rooks, it's gonna be a dead draw. We never are able to win the endgame. But we have a way to exchange. Of course, we look for checks. Rook e2 and rook f1 are the checks. Rook e2 doesn't work because king takes, but rook f1, king takes, we can take the rook on f3, and then we are gonna win the pawn and win the game. So we go for it. Okay, here, pretty important moments. We have king g3 and king g4. If you call king g3, there is h5, and then we take it, and we have this h passer, which doesn't win if our opponent's king is in time to get to the corner, which he is, so king g3 doesn't work. We have to go to g4 to be able, after h5, to take it with the king. That is what happens here, and the most important thing is the opposition again, king g4, and then we have a way to go forward. Okay, so here we have a check, bishop g5 check, king goes to b1. Do we have a good way to continue though? Rook g2, the bishop just escapes, well, not to c4 but to b5. Rook a8 seems like an interesting option, once again attacking. Then the bishop has to go away, otherwise you're going to lose the bishop, and then we have bishop a2 in a1, and then we go away and we win the bishop. So that seems like a good variation for us. Okay, here we have to be very careful. Remember to check before you make your move whether the piece you're moving can be captured or not. So rook a8 and rook b7 doesn't work because the bishop is controlling those squares. Bishop c7 also doesn't work because even though the bishop cannot be captured, but the rook can be captured. Although it's not the end of the variation, as you might see already, bishop c7, rook king takes a7. The king has no squares to go. Do we have any follow-up check? Knight b5 doesn't work because b5 is a square. We have another rook, rook a1. That's going to be a checkmate, so that does work for us. Okay, it's puzzle number 40, so we have 10 to go, the most difficult ones. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, hit the like button because, as you could see, it's very difficult for me to talk at this point. So I hope you support me. So we have here some discover attacks opportunity. By the way, our queen is hanging, so it's very important not to blunder it. The way not to blunder it is to go for some discover checks. We have two ways to do that: knight f8 check and knight c5. Knight f8, king will go to e8 and it's gonna attack the knight. Queen c8 could be a logical next step, but unfortunately the square is not available. And queen d7, he's gonna take, and then we don't have enough. Knight c5, on the other hand, king d8 is an immediate checkmate. King e8, we have queen to d7 check, king f8 is the only move, and then we can get back to e6 with another check and we win the queen. So that seems to work. And we solve the puzzle correctly. Okay, we have the rook's endgame, and our opponent has a distant passer, so everything seems to be great for him, but his king is not really that comfortable here on c5, and we can create a checkmating threat in one, which is rook to b7, rook to b5. Basically, there is no way to stop the checkmate. He sacrifices the rook, but it doesn't help. Okay, here it's a little bit tricky because we have rook takes e7 and queen takes e7. Both moves are, of course, very obvious because the bishop is not protected. But the question is, which one do we use to take? And taking with the queen makes more sense to me because we double along the 7th thread. That allows us to create some dangerous threads. Here, if the king goes away, we just have queen g7 checkmate. If the king goes this side, then we have queen h7 checkmate or queen h4 checkmate. And there is another move to check rook f7. We take it, king goes away, still queen h7 checkmate. So actually, this puzzle seems to be relatively simple to me, straightforward. Okay, this one is more complicated because we have a check, but he's gonna just take it. We're having a follow-up, queen f4, he can block it. Nothing dangerous. So maybe bishop takes g7, come into captures, king takes, queen d4, f6, and once again I don't see anything at all. But queen d4 is not the only check there. Bishop takes, queen c3 is another check, and it's also a double attack, and we win the bishop. So that is the way you go. You consider different check opportunities, you consider different active opportunities until you come to the right answer. Okay, here we have a lot of different moves. First of all, of course, we can take and enjoy winning an exchange, but we only have one pawn, and I'm not sure it's good enough. Let's see if we have something better than that. I still want to attack the rook, so I want to get back with my bishop. If the king goes to the corner, I just win the rook. If the king goes here, do I have any follow-up checks? I have rook g2, but that blocks the bishop. I don't want to do that. I have rook f8, another check, and it's also a double attack, and then I win the rook for free, so I like it. Yeah, here I can take with the rook and with the bishop, but my bishop is hanging, so I take with the bishop. Okay, here I need to create some checkmating thread, because otherwise it's gonna be, once again, rook endgame, it's gonna be a draw. So the king wants to escape. I need to prevent that. I need to play h4, then g5 is covered, and g3 is a huge checkmating threat. Rook to c1, and now g3 is a checkmate in one. Okay, we have 4 puzzles to go. Most difficult ones, let's see if we can deal with it. Knight c6, no checks possible, no captures, knight e4 will just lose. We actually have pretty much one active piece here and the potential for another one to be activated. So I'm looking at this knight. The knight can create a threat of attacking the queen and also attacking the c7 pawn, so it's a double threat. The only way not to lose the c7 square and not to blunder the queen is queen to e5, and then we can attack this queen again, because the knight is protected, so we have something like d4. And if the queen goes away, we have this fork and win the game. We can take en passant, but then we can continue attacking it, and then actually we have a problem, because then the knight will be captured. Knight b5, queen e5, maybe not d4, but f4 is another way. Captures, now knight takes, our knight is still protected, and we win some material there in the end. Yeah, d4 doesn't work, f4 works, and we go for it. Okay, now we have queen h4 check, very obvious check, and I just want to get to it because there is no other move for us. And here it's very tricky puzzle, because if you go queen f2 seems to be extremely tempting, but unfortunately he's just gonna block it with a knight, then the king will be able to escape. We don't want that, And we have another check, queen f4. Remember to check all of the active opportunities, all of the checks. So queen f4 check, king goes to e2, and now queen f2 is a checkmate. Okay, do we have any checks here? We have knight takes b6 check, pawn takes, and then we have another check, bishop a6. And we need to find the right move order because we can do it both ways. So bishop a6 first without sacrifice, king to b8, knight takes b6, queen is hanging, but well, it's gonna escape, queen d6, and then I don't see any follow-up. If you do it in the other direction, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop a6, now the king has nowhere to escape, queen b7, well, black has to sacrifice, and then we are gonna win the queen. Okay, the last puzzle we have to solve. Let's do it together. The queen is hanging, but our queen is also hanging, so we need to find a way to save our queen first, and then to win the queen of our opponent. So queen c1 seems like we are winning the bishop with a check. What can be better than that? And then still our queen is hanging, so I don't want to take this queen. I'm looking for some checks. Queen c2 seems to win the pawn, and now finally our queen is not under attack, so we can just capture this queen, and that concludes our challenge today, because we went up to 2600 rated puzzles, and we have solved all of them using our four steps system formula. So let me know in the comments what you think about it, whether it helped you to bring your chess into the new level in terms of your calculation. I have explained you the entire decision-making process you need to go through. It's very important not only to consider your own options, but also your opponents. So feel free to hit the like button to support and help this video to spread to more people. In this video, I'm going to share with you the world's toughest puzzles. Try to solve it.